Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome, Bo'achem L'Shalom. Welcome to Congregation Beit Tikva, the House of Hope. Let's begin with some beautiful flute music. We are delighted to have Alma and Wendy Dankoff on the flute, and Jolene Gear is on the piano. If you'd like to follow the words, we're in the middle of page 654. The melody is Erev Shel Shoshanim, the evening of the roses. Let's continue with another beautiful duet, Shalom Aleichem, traditional Shabbat evening melody that we all know so well. We're on page 142 in the Siddur, page 142 for Shalom Aleichem. Continue with the blessing over the Shabbat candles. Let's all turn in our Siddurim, page 121, in the middle of 121. We'll read together, and then we'll sing the blessing together on page 120. O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu Let's continue, and we're reading a meditation on page 126, on 126. I begin with a prayer of gratitude for all that is holy in my life. God needs no words, no English or Hebrew, no semantics and no services, but I need them. Through prayer, I can sense my inner strength, my inner purpose, my inner joy, my capacity to love. As I reach upward in prayer, I sense these qualities in my Creator. To love God is to love each other, to work to make our lives better. To love God is to love the world God created and to work to perfect it. To love God is to love dreams of peace and joy that illumine all of us and to bring that vision to life. Let's turn to the Psalms, as we always begin on Kabbalat Shabbat on Friday night with Psalm 95, affectionately known as L'chun Ranana. Come, let us sing joyously to our Lord. We're on page 130. On the bottom of the page. Come, let us sing joyously to Adonai. Raise a shout for our rock and deliverer. Let us come into God's presence with praise. Let us raise a shout for God in song. For Adonai is a great God, the great ruler of all divine beings. In God's hands are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are God's. God's is the sea, God made it, and the land which God's hands fashioned. Come, let us bow down and kneel, bend the knee before Adonai, our Maker. For Adonai is our God, and we are the people God tends, the flock in God's care. Oh, if you would but heed God's charge this day. Let's read together on 134. Sing praises to Adonai with a lyre and melodious song, with trumpets and the blast of the horn. Raise a shout before Adonai, the ruler. Let the sea and all within it thunder, the world and its inhabitants. Let the rivers clap their hands, The mountains sing joyously together at the presence of Adonai. For God is coming to rule the earth. God will rule the world justly and its peoples with equity. That's a hope and a vision of the messianic future. And so the Psalms conclude really with Psalm 29, which we're not going to sing this evening, but if you look at the Hebrew on 136, 137, you'll see that there are 7 different lines, 7 different verses in the midst of this long psalm that begin with the words Kol Adonai, the voice of the Lord. And it's no coincidence that it's 7 referring to the 7 days of the week, but the rabbis explaining why this psalm was chosen as part of the liturgy for Friday night say that 7 really is an intimation of the 7 blessings of the tefillah that we're going to read a little bit later. So as you and I know, it's a magical, mystical number. That's Psalm 29. So we're going to continue on 138 and sing with Alma and Wendy and Jolene, Lecha Dodi, page 138, verses 1, 2, and 9. Verse 9. Let's turn a few pages to the words of the Chatzi Kaddish, the half Kaddish. We're on 144. If you're able, please stand up and join us. If not, be comfortable and sing with us as we begin. We enter into the blessings that lead up to the Shema Yisrael. On 144. Yitkada v'yitkada Shemei Rabba Yamadi Rakute Yamlit Machute Becha Yechon Uv Yom Echon Uchayedecho Beit Yisrael Bidromam, Bidnaseh, Bidara, Bidaleh, Bidala, Shemei Kedusha, Brichu, Lela Min Kol Birchata, Shirata, Tushbechata V'nechemata, Tamiram Yama, Vimeru, Amen. We turn the page, we're singing together the Baruch Hu. We're on 146. Baruch Hu et Adonai Amvorach, Baruch Adonai Amvorach, Leolam Vaed. Let's read the first blessing together. The Mariv Aravim. We're on page 148. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully arranges the time, and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night, and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Sabaoth is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Amariv Aravim. The second blessing, giving thanks to God for the gift of Torah and all of the commandments, we're on 150. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel, by teaching us Torah, mitzvot, laws, and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. We sing together the Shama. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. So if you're standing, be seated, relax, be comfortable. We continue, as in every service, with the V'ahavta, the words from Deuteronomy chapter 6. We're on 154. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol yodecha v'hayu ha'dvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha v'lechtecha b'derech v'v'shachtecha v'kumecha Ukshartam leota yadecha, v'hayu letotafot be'einecha, uchtatam al mezuzot beitecha, u'hisharecha. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'yitem kedoshim lelohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeti etchem, me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem le'elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Emet. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments, and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet. We turn to the traditional, or one of our favorite melodies for Mi Chamocha. We're on page 158 in the prayer book, singing together. Praised are you, Adonai, for redeeming the people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. So we turn to the beautiful melody and the beautiful prayer known as Hashkivenu. Alma and Wendy will give us a wonderful duet for this. This is a prayer of blessing, asking God to watch over us and protect us on this Sabbath evening and day. Let's turn to 162. We're on the top of page 162, and we're singing altogether the Vishamru, words from Exodus. The people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing it throughout all the ages as a covenant for all time. So We continue now with the tefillah, the 7 blessings that honor the seventh day, the day of the Sabbath. And the tefillah begins with an introduction from Psalm 51. We're on page 164. And then we'll sing the first blessing on 166 for our matriarchs and patriarchs, and then the second blessing on 168 if you're able. Sing with us, stand up and join us. If not, be comfortable and lift up your voices together. Adonai sefatatitam Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Let's turn the page to 171, please. And we're reading a poetic rendition of the third blessing. The third blessing reminds us of the holiness of God's name. Since all of these blessings are about gratitude, we're giving thanks to God's gift of the Sabbath and also the reality of the transcendence of the divine. We're on the top of page 171. We have a hot cold that's joining us today.
Right.
Let's read together in 171. Days pass and years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see wherever we gaze that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. Blessed is the Eternal One, the Holy God, Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. And we continue with the English for the fourth blessing. We're on page 173. 173. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai b'kadesh ha-Shabbat. And together in English for the Ritzeh, we're on page 175. Ever-present One, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer, wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands. You are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, shalotcha levatecha b'yirah na'avot. The blessing of thanksgiving and Modim. Let's read together. We're on 177. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth, which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, atov shimcha, u'lecha na'eh lehodot. So we come to the seventh blessing, the blessing of peace, the blessing of wholeness, and giving thanks for blessing our Jewish people throughout the world. Shalom Rav. We're on page 178.
Leon.
minutes for our own personal prayers and meditations. Let's think of our loved ones, our friends and family, our congregants all over the globe as we sing together the Misha Berach melody. Let's first think of a few of our dear friends in need of uplifting and spiritual and physical strengthening. We think of our cantor, Ephraim Herrera, and his father, cantor's father, Eliodoro Herrera. We also offer Misha Berach for Doreen Hertig, Lynn Kelly, Flo Vinnick, Arlene Vinnick. We also think of our congregant past president, Kate Shane, and remember as well Paulette Wagner and Jim Taylor, Leela's husband. So let's sing together. We're on page 371, middle of the page, Misha Berach Avotenu, 371. So as you know, we're in the midst of the book of Leviticus, and this is one of the 7 times during the year, depending on the lunar calendar, that we read 2 parashiot, 2 sedras in one Sabbath morning. It's called Tazria Metzora. It's all about the rules and regulations concerning purification of one's body, especially after a woman gives birth, purifying herself. And then the story, as you know, goes into a long discussion about skin ailments, diseases. In the King James Bible, usually translated as leprosy, although we don't consider, modern biblical scholars don't think of that illness that's enunciated in the book, in Leviticus, as leprosy. It was probably some kind of psoriasis, some kind of skin inflammation. So there are a long series of verses and chapters concerning how do you purify yourself when you get this skin ailment. And it wasn't just a person's illness, it was also considered that a building could be contaminated by this rot, by this fungus. And so buildings and public spaces had to be purified as well. So that's all about the Torah, or that's a précis. We'll talk about it more on Shabbos morning. This day, yesterday, was in fact the 73rd anniversary of the State of Israel. Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, a very major celebration in Israel, obviously. So I want to talk about, for a few moments, one of the magnificent poets of the land of Israel, a woman named Rachel. I have not sung to you, my country, nor glorified your name in deeds of valor or the spoils of war. There's only a tree my hands have planted on the Jordan's silent banks, just a path my feet have trodden across the fields. Rachel became known as the great poetess of the land of Israel, even though she died long before Israel became a nation state. She was remembered in the 1950s by Zalman Shazar, who was one of the early presidents of Israel, and he was also a writer who glorified her in these words. He said, "The gates opened, and there emerged from the courtyard a flock of squawking geese, who proceeded to spread themselves all across the hillside. And behind them came a beautiful, tall, lithe, upright woman in a white dress, blue-eyed, as slender as the mountains, as beautiful as Lake Kinneret. And in her hand she had a palm branch, and with such scepter, her young, warm voice held sway over all the animals." So the land that Rachel came to, she came to Palestine more than 110 years ago or so. The land was not the land that you and I know as Israel today. It was a different kind of place. She grew up, she was born in Russia. Her father had somehow survived 25 years in the service of the Tsar. Most young Jewish men who were conscripted into the Russian army back in the late 1800s either never survived or had to give up their Jewishness after so many years. Her father was an ardent Jew and gave her the vision of what Palestine could be. And so in 1909, she and her sister sailed to Palestine. They were teenagers, but they were intent on living their lives in Palestine. Once they got there, they knew they were in the right place. They took a room in Rehovot. They learned Hebrew by trying to speak Hebrew all day long. They'd only allow each other to speak Russian for 1 hour in the evening. And slowly, remember, before World War I, modern Hebrew was not the lingua franca yet that he had. It took many, many years for many experts on the language to sort of fill in the gaps, to make it into a spoken, everyday language. But Rachel was intent on learning Hebrew. She was in love with Hebrew. And so she, along with her sister and then a third sister, immigrated to Palestine, and they were kind of the focal point, the intellectual, spiritual focal point of that community. And you might say they had their own salon, as they did in Europe back in the day. Rachel, by the way, was not really satisfied with this. She thought to be a pioneer, you had to know the land. How do you know the land? You make music with the dirt, with the earth, with hoes and rakes, and you paint the face of the earth. So she went off to Lake Kinneret to study agriculture. All of a sudden, World War I intervened. And what happened was, because she realized she didn't know much about agriculture, she had actually sailed back to France before the war started to study at an agricultural school outside of Paris. The war began, she was stuck. In fact, most citizens at that time were often repatriated to their, quote, native land. So she was literally shipped. She was sent back to Russia on a train. And as she describes in her autobiography, she spent 4 horrible, incredibly cold, miserable years in Russia trying to stay alive during the war. By the time she was able to leave Odessa in the beginning of 1919 to come back to Palestine, she had contracted tuberculosis. But she was intent, no matter what her health was, she was intent on being an Israeli, a pioneer, and now she had the expertise in agriculture to begin to teach. And so first she worked in a kibbutz and later moved to Jerusalem and taught Yemenite girls about how to cultivate the land, how to fertilize the land and make the most out of their plantings. And she stayed in Jerusalem from that point on, the end of post-World War I, until 1931, when she died of tuberculosis. In the 20s, and in the last 7, 8, 9 years of her life, she glorified the land with her poetry. She not only loved the land, but she spoke about the struggle that every pioneer had to go through in order to take the land out of its marshy, malaria-infested existence and make it into a blossoming, beautiful place for the future people of Israel. Israel for her was the land of dreams. When God returns the captivity of Zion, we are all of those, the ones who dream. There were some things that couldn't be promised to her. She wanted to live a long time. She wanted to teach girls for many more years. I mean, when she passed away, she was all of about 40, 41 years old. But she had already completed many, many hundreds of magnificent poems about the land of Israel. And when the state of Israel became a new nation in 1948, many of the, so to speak, the pioneers, the politicians like Ben-Gurion, Prime Minister Shazar and so forth, others glorified the land by quoting Rachel's poems in their public speeches. So little by little, she became known as really the mother figure of Israeli literature and poetry. As I said, at this point, she had already died almost 20 years before. But what I think the message of her poetry is, one of the messages is the sense of dreaming, of looking into the future, of having a sense of hope and a sense of vitality for the future. She wrote, "Stretch out your hands, behold from afar, out there, thither, none comes. To each of us is our own Mount Nebo in the land's vast expanse." She was writing about the promised land that she never saw, which would become a new nation. But in that promised land, she was saying, we all reach out for the possible. We all reach for the possible. And we all reach for our promise. Shabbat Shalom, Mazel Tov to the state of Israel. So this is a busy week coming up. We have a board meeting Monday night at 6:30. If you have anything special to include in our new bulletin that will come out at the end of April, please send it in really quickly. We've got to collate, we've got to edit, put everything together next week so that we'll know what's happening. We're in the midst of the Omer, the 49 days of the counting of the Omer. So if you're interested in that, give me a call. Hopefully, in the beginning of May, we'll have a series of short classes, or I should say 4 brief classes on the Psalms, because we started studying Psalms in the winter of 2020 and then were interrupted by the pandemic. So I want to conclude some of our learning about the Psalms and the poetry of the Psalms, and then we'll rest up and get ready for Kabbalah in July. Anything else happening? We will. The question has been asked, when are we going to have prayer services? When are we going to have Shabbat in the sanctuary for everyone? Probably we will begin, God willing, in the middle of May. Perhaps the second Shabbos, the second Shabbat in May. And we'll look forward. The regulations from the governor's office are such that we can have we can at least have 30 people in the room, and I know many people would like to come back and pray together. So let's plan on that in a few weeks' time. We'll keep you posted. I want a special thanks again to Alma and to Wendy. Thank you, Jolene, for accompanying us, and thank you, Lela, for recording our service, as you always do. We're on page 586 for our concluding prayers. If you're able, stand up and we'll sing the Aleinu together. Let's read this poem on 583 before we come to the Kaddish prayer. On 583. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we're weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as they live, we too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. On the Sabbath, we recall those whose lives have been a blessing to us during this period of Shloshim, 30 days of mourning. We remember Lela Dawkins, brother of Lela. And on this, their yahrzeit memorial with love and devotion, we now recall Dan Barber, friend of Barb Lamont, Richard Brenner, Dick Brenner, husband of Eleanor Brenner, Michael Colbert, son of Lynn Kelly, Gerald Davidson, father of Abigail Davidson, Lawrence Garfield, father of Marcel Cady. Albert Kahn, uncle of Nancy Hardington. Ralph Klinghoffer, the brother of Fred Klinghoffer. Bernard J. Levy, my father. Benjamin Lewis, father of Henry Lewis. So let's turn please to 598 for the words of the Mourner's Kaddish on page 598. I will read this slowly. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba Alma Dankoff Chiratei v'yamlich malchutei b'chai echon u'yom echon u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael b'gala b'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabba mevorach le'olam omei amaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yinaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kusha v'richu Lela mikol v'yarchata v'shirata tush v'chata v'nechamata damiram v'yalma v'imru amen Yehi shlama rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, u'yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony in in our world bring peace unto us, to all the people of the Jewish faith and all good peoples throughout the world. We say together, amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, Yaseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu. Our final melody, as you know, the Kiddush, the sanctification of the Sabbath day, and the words are on page 123 in the book, in our Siddur. Page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei beri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'rata banu, v'shabbat kodsho v'amal ratzon imchilanu. Zikaron l'maaseh bereshit, ki hu yom tehillah l'nikra'e kodesh, zecher l'siyat Mitzrayim, ki banu echarta, v'tanu kidashta, mikol Shabbat koshercha v'yavu ratzon inkaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Hashem. Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Good Shabbos.